Hello there and welcome to another episode of ResourceFULL. My name is Tom Manners. On Twitter, I'm at Manomatics, and all the ResourceFULL videos and my other CPD videos and other information, which is kind of interesting, is on my website, tommanners.co.uk. Now, when I started doing these interviews, I've always tried to keep them no longer than an hour, and my guest and I today are going to make sure we make a note of that, so I'll make sure I note the time. Brilliant, 1 hour, great. Because we can talk for hours, but there's so much to talk about online with the amount of freely available resources there are. And it's so great that people do this and give it out there and say, look, you can use this for free. Now, I think today's featured website is certainly different to ones I've looked at in the past. And there's tools on there to use, and there are quick questions, and there's the activity in the classroom. And the reason I know this is because the gentleman I'm about to interview, he uses them in his own classroom. He's created them, he's learned how to code these things, and he keeps changing it from requests as well. In fact, I'm not going to lie, I've got a request for him, and I'm going to ask him to do it in a few moments' time. But the website we're looking at today is the Maths Whiteboard. It's Matt Woodfine, at PixelMatt the app on Twitter. And so I've got to make sure, come on down, Matt Woodfine. Dun, 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 dun. Hello, Matt.
Hello.
that idea that people are actually looking when you wave. Matt, thank you very much for taking the time to join me.
Not a problem.
But also, on behalf of everybody, before we get started, thank you for being somebody else who's so willing to just share stuff for free. It's great. You've obviously got a passion for this, and you just want to share it with the world. So good on you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, let's get straight into it. Tell us about you. Tell us about your background, your teaching background, and then we'll start looking at the website, because you've got a number of tools on there which just so quick and easy to use. And I know just before we started recording, you said there was one section that you didn't feel you really wanted to talk about, but I think we should. So there's plenty of elements to it, and you say there's more to come. But tell us about you first and foremost.
Yeah, so I've been teaching for 15 years. Prior to that, I held a position where I was looking after learning physically disabled adults. And it was through that I really felt that that's where I got a bit of a passion for helping other people. And then I became a TA soon after that for about 6 months in a local school. Actually, I haven't really ventured that far because it's quite literally just around the corner from where I live now. But yeah, I then started working in the classroom, and then I just suddenly became really inspired by the teachers who I was supporting. And then I did my PGCE down in a school in Kent, and I got my first job there. Then I started finding, although my degree is in maths, I found IT really interesting. I went to a school that had been part of the Building Schools for the Future project, and they were given £15 million or something silly like that to basically gut the school and make it the school that they wanted it to be, to sort of work in the future.
Okay.
And I loved that role. That was perfect. But then I met my wife, and then I moved away, and I went off to another school in St. Neots, and I became the subject leader there. I hadn't actually applied to be the subject leader. I was going to be the second in department, but the subject leader fell ill and nobody wanted the subject leader role. So I kind of filled those shoes as a very young head of department in quite a challenging school. So they went into special measures a year after I joined. And that in itself was amazing, to be able to go from, I think we're on something silly like 23%, and we managed to get it up to about 33, 34% A star to C within 1 year, working with a very keen department, and it was brilliant. But because of that role, I found that my teaching kind of suffered through middle management and the responsibilities there. So I saw a role for lead practitioner at Hinchinbrook School and applied for it. There were 2 applicants, me, a very young, eager person, and someone with a hefty amount of experience who was my mentor for a long time whilst he was at Hinchinbrook. And we ended up both getting the job, even though there was only one role. So we were very much chalk and cheese, but we brought very different things to the lead practitioner role within our school, and I've been there ever since. So yeah, 11 years on and still loving it.
And as this lead practitioner, it gives you the opportunity to focus on pedagogy. And I think your website is about supporting pedagogy. It's not just here are clever maths questions, and some of the things websites are focused on during this series. It's great that we're seeing these wonderful tasks, but yours is about supporting pedagogy, really.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, for years, we spend a long time populating USB sticks of resources. And I found that I ended up carrying this around for many, many years without actually tapping into it, because I ended up looking for other resources that would support the students that I was teaching at the time. And the stuff that I produced before it just didn't seem to fit the purpose. You know, it suited the kids at that one point in time, but now I've got a brand new cohort of kids and I need to support them in a slightly different way. And I found myself just basically, a lot of my time was just editing PowerPoints or creating something that was bespoke to the kids that are in front of me. And, you know, like the website came about as through a discussion with the Prince's Teaching Institute, who my school are a part of. And they kind of said, you know, you've kind of lost your touch. You've got into a few bad habits over the years, and we need to really sort of focus your vision on correcting some of those bad habits. And yeah, the Maths Whiteboard website was basically a way of me nurturing the best bits out of my teaching again.
Now, before we started talking, start recording, sorry, you mentioned Rose and Shine to me, and I can see elements of Rose and Shine in the planning that you've done for the website. So let's start looking at it, because again, what I think your website does, it supports the pedagogy, i.e. the delivery in the classroom, and also very much the fluency part of what we're looking for in the national curriculum, with fluency, reasoning, problem solving. Your target is fluency, there can be no doubt of that, and also the exposition, the teaching of the topic. So do you want to share from your screen, and let's start looking at the Maths Whiteboard website. Now, while you're loading it up, the email address, well, pardon me, the website address, HBK portal, responding to your school, referring to your school, pardon me. But this is, of course, accessible to absolutely everybody. So let's look at the mini whiteboard. Yeah, the mini whiteboard, the Maths Whiteboard website. Now, you talk me through it. So the software which can be launched, which I guess is the first thing you want to click on. So feel free to start it. Let's get started.
Yeah, so there are some other tools at the bottom here. This one in particular, I think, is incredibly powerful, because if we're talking about perhaps structuring our lesson in order to be able to secure knowledge, assess what students are basically bringing to the lesson, to be able to sort of like cement the knowledge into their long-term memory, then the last lesson last week, last topic, last term is a really good starting point. So basically,
again, we're talking Rose and Shine straight away, aren't we? We're talking about retrieval practice, and it's just a nice way of making a very quick. This is a really lovely tool for making a quick starter, and it's actually planned as opposed to just taking a worksheet of there's some past questions. You have to think. You type in quickly what you want. I think, and this, feel free to be talking over you here, but from what I saw of this is really means you tailor a very quick starter, but tailor it for your class that you feel is needed.
Exactly. And even if things slightly change, maybe you planned all your lessons in advance and you got to sort of like the Friday lesson, and then all of a sudden that starter doesn't quite fit because it was a PowerPoint that you created, and that PowerPoint slide now needs to be edited because they got further or they didn't get as far as what you were expecting them to be by that point. The idea with this is you know, if I just type in equations, I was doing this with year 9 the other day, and if I just start this up, it could be that, you know, students were okay with solving equations with unknowns on both sides, but actually what they needed was perhaps a few more terms, or maybe ones that have more negative coefficients, or, you know, brackets. And the beauty of it is that, you know, every time you select a question, a star effectively, it will generate another question for you. And, you know,
so if you click on 4-star then, and 4-star again, and 4-star again, because you might want something in particular. So if you click on 4-star again for me, if you wouldn't mind. And they're brilliant. So in other words, you know, it's that kind of one with brackets, X on both sides, but maybe for some reason you want to appear somewhat differently. Can I check, with all these put in, are they completely generated? So could the X be a non-integer answer?
At the moment, they are all integer answers, and that was purely just for checking in the classroom. So
I think it's the right thing to do. I just want to, I think that's the kind of thing when people be watching that they'd be worried about, because you don't want it to be something particularly complicated or impossible, for example. In other words, these aren't just completely randomly generated numbers that are thrown into an equation. You've thought about the questions that are on here as well, which is fab.
Yeah, and what it does do is it also gives you scope to pose those questions at the end of the lesson, like, oh, you happen to have got integers as all of your answers for today. You know, is it possible to get a fraction? Can you now create an equation with a fractional answer? Or, you know, it kind of gives you a lot of possibilities. Even though I've kind of structured the website the way it is, it still gives a little bit of independence from staff's point of view to steer that pedagogy towards the end.
So on each of these then, so last week you'd be able to type something in. So yesterday we did lessons, last week we did angles, and I'm assuming if you just typed the search tool for last week, the word angles, and then you've got plenty of options of questions there again.
Yep.
Super stuff. I mean, you don't, what's the open main menu on the top left?
So that will just bring up the menu again, and that will then allow you to go back and just choose perhaps a different topic, or in particular, maybe you didn't want equations with unknowns on both sides, you just wanted it on one side. I mean, the wonderful thing about this is I've tried not to make it too soft on the kids. In particular, you know, we tend to teach with, you know, for instance, equations, just sticking with that topic for a second. We tend to teach with positives everywhere, and we end up with a positive answer. And the idea with this is that it kind of goes back to, you know, recall, practice, all of those essential skills. We've taught negatives many times before. Let's make sure that that fits in as a topic in many different places as possible. So yeah, you end up with some quite horrible equations in some cases, you know, even ones involving fractions, or, you know, there you go. How many times do we try and avoid that because we don't want our lessons to fail, or the kids to all of a sudden get to the end of the lesson and then they can't solve that? You know, I try to make sure that the site caters for hopefully all eventualities that you could possibly end up with, which is why I opted for 6 stars as opposed to 3. We tend to sort of move into bronze, silver, gold, or red, amber, green questions. And when I'd started developing it, I just couldn't see that I could differentiate strongly enough across just 3 different levels. I wanted to go a little bit more. And although I've limited it to 6, I think with any topic, you could go for 10, 20, and just get a really busy screen. But
you then go into different topics, aren't you? I mean, this is solving equations, linear equations. And as you said, there's plenty of steps. You've got up to 6 here. But then it's a different topic. If it's solving quadratics, it's a different topic. And then you'll have your 6 stars on there as well. So really nice resource just to quickly, for any person who just wants a quick starter, they know what's coming up. And then, they know what they've been teaching. And it might be, the clever part of this is you think, well, what topic have we done in the past that might just support today's learning? Sometimes it's about recall and retrieval practice, but sometimes it's about the prerequisites. So testing something, you might think, well, hold on, I've done linear equation. I can see you typing simultaneous equations here. And you think, oh, they will be useful for me. So I don't think you just type in randomly. You can do it 2 different ways, I personally think, on this. You can type in, right, a last topic, last week, last term, or you can be clever about it and try and make those all link to today's lesson. It depends what you're trying to achieve, but you've made that really easy to do that with this search tool. So that's fantastic. So great place to start. And as we said, it's supporting pedagogy. So the start of the lesson, that's on the board, which I'm assuming you could screen grab as well and print. So that would be pretty easy, just if you did want to do it printed.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So let's launch that software then. Yeah,
so the main point of introducing the last topic sort of feature of the website is essentially it's a miniature version of the main website. So if we are quite happy with the functionality that the starter tool basically has, then you'll be just as happy with this one as well. So basically, this is a full list of all the different topics that you could possibly have. And I've made it sure that it's a responsive website. So as this window shrinks down, it will basically alter the features of the website so that it would also work on mobile and tablet devices as well. So what I tend to do is, once I've done a lot of teaching, I tend to hand this over to the kids, because we've got a bring your own device policy at Hinchinbrook, which then enables them to be able to have a copy of the website and produce their own questions in front of them and choose the kind of level that they want to be doing as well. So I mean, if we just quickly look at the full scope of how I would potentially use this in the classroom. So once I've done my starter, we then move on to the main sort of teaching aspect. And, you know, I might introduce a topic, perhaps it links in with something that we've done before, and just sort of thinking about my year 7 lesson. We looked at triangles the other day, and obviously they came up with all the different terminologies and also the notation that's used obviously on the sides of triangles. And then we started looking at the angles in the triangle. And for this, what I wanted to do was start off with potentially a modeling question to begin with. So it would have started off with something like, what is the correct mathematical name for this shape? And then I could kind of give them this one. What can you tell me about the angles inside of a triangle? Well, a lot of them straight away just sort of said 180. Okay, so how can we use that fact with this type of question? And then straight away, it would kind of just unpicked, you know, the core knowledge that they needed. This then gave me a way of modeling how I would want them to show that knowledge being used in this particular context. And then obviously the recall question was, or I do, you do, was a perfect way of then replicating exactly what they'd just seen in their own particular way. And obviously with like the main mini WB website, if I click on the 2-star again, it will just basically refresh. So there I had 2 very similar questions. Both of them had 49 in the bottom left-hand corner, and perhaps I didn't want to do that again.
Oh no, I like that. I immediately thought, what do you notice? So therefore, if the one's gone down by 5, the other one must have gone up by 5. I thought that was really nice. Take credit. I thought that was a lovely question. Could be the lovely reasoning in those previous examples. Can I make an example, a suggestion here, then, Matt? Because again, before we start recording, you said that your colleagues and others have asked you, could you little suggestions how to improve it. When I use I do, we do, you do, I don't like to show the one on the right hand side because I want them to be focusing on what I'm doing. Hence the I do. And if that's there might be, there's cognitive overload, there's lack of focus. So is it easy? Apologies, I haven't asked you this, sorry. But it was something I was thinking when looking at the website. Can you cover the right-hand side and then reveal it when it's needed?
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, I'll even get that in for you tonight.
It's actually easy to do, because that's how I would use an I do, you do, because they're on the right-hand side, they're not listening to what you're doing when you do the I do, they're looking at the you do, they're not paying attention because they know that's coming up. And so I really try and not allow that to come up in my PowerPoint. So is that okay?
Well, you get that one kid, or you get that one kid who's done that question already, and then you're like, oh.
Yeah, but you want the point of the I do is I'm the most knowledgeable person in the room, usually, I hope. And I want them to be hearing the words I'm saying. I want them to be hearing what I'm telling them and why I've done it a certain way and what language I'm using. So, yeah, I should have asked you this before. I apologize. But there you go. If you can cover the you do, is it just a simple kind of put a block on and click it or something? Would that be easy to make?
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, even though you've just sort of suggested that now, the whole MWB website came about as a department focus, and a guy basically introduced, sort of said, we're going to be practicing the use of mini whiteboards in the classroom, and that's going to be our focus for the next month. And I was like, okay, so every single member of staff is now going to go away and start creating PowerPoints for this. I can come up with a better solution. And I started creating the question bank, and then naturally it started evolving. So I think the following month we then had, we're focusing on starters. And I was like, oh, hang on a minute, I've got something for that. And then straight away it was through the Rosenshine research that I did. That's where the modeling aspect came from. And
we're talking about it. It's next to me, for God's sake. I'm just at the point where the book is next to me.
So and a lot of it has come out of people's willingness to just sort of share really, really good ideas in order to not better this product, but actually just a better teaching in general. And I think, this could be an amazing platform for people to use, and certainly it's getting some great feedback, which is a boost for me, because half the time working in IT, you only tend to hear of the complaints, people not finding stuff that isn't working.
We do like to moan about IT, you're right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this page, though, if I may then, Matt, because again, so the I do and the you do, that's, and by the way, mini whiteboards, anyone I ever work with knows my absolute adoration of them, and there is no better way of checking for understanding as far as I'm concerned. But I can see on the left-hand side there, select a question to reveal answer. So that's there to support people as well. And the bottom right-hand side, secure WB. Talk, what have we got here?
Yeah, so after we've obviously modeled it, we might move on to potentially the mini whiteboard. Or
model it a couple of times, because as you said, you can click on the double star, one double star at the moment, 2 star at the moment. So you can click on 2 star again, and click on 2 star, and keep changing it. So it's not as if you only do one, but then as you say, it's securing them at that level. So does that then open that, I assume, is independent questions?
Yeah, so then you sort of like move towards potentially just showing 6 of exactly the same type of question. So we are just dealing with scaling triangles where they've just got to add the 2 angles, and we're just basically cementing that core knowledge that we're adding the 2 angles, we're taking it away from 180 and just getting the kids to recite that fact. Because then when we move into the 3 star, 4 star, 5 star, we're still going to be doing exactly the same process, but in different contexts. So we're just sort of securing the knowledge at this point of what I'm expecting to see in their work. And that if I then show them an isosceles triangle or something else, they then don't freak out at the idea that they've got too many steps to then follow. So, I mean
go ahead, sorry.
So, Siri's trying to answer my own question. So yeah, what I'd probably do beforehand is actually start looking at the mini whiteboard tool. And the idea of this is that it sort of shows the same question again, but on a full page. And it just enables you to then just show one question to the whole class and then get that immediate feedback. So this is where, and this is worked brilliantly, obviously in a socially distant classroom where I need to be able to see the work of every single kid, that, you know, using mini whiteboards and these questions, I can just now sensibly move through all of these questions and see that I'm actually moving everyone along with me. And then obviously for the 6 star questions, we then get to ones that look like this, where it's a combination of things and multi-steps in order to get the answer. And yeah, I mean, this has been absolutely brilliant, but you can kind of sort of see how once you've done the starter, we've got the modeling, we've then got an assessment opportunity through the use of mini whiteboards. We then move on to securing that knowledge. So perhaps we've moved through several stars and we've got a sticking point, and actually we just need 6 questions on it in order to build their long-term memory. And yeah, that's where the secure WB comes in.
So could you click on for this example, if you wouldn't mind, the secure WB? So have a look at these. Cool.
Yeah, so
you've moved where the Y is a couple of times as well, which I think is powerful. But also, I mean, actually, the previous one, you and you'll forgive me if I'm going to start saying something negative, but I'm meaning it in a positive way. All of the triangles before, they did look exactly the same. So there wasn't as if we'd done any variation in the direction of them, maybe, or the orientation of them. But the fact they all look the same, but the numbers were different, makes pupils have to think about it. It's not assuming how it looks. So it looks like it's 40. Well, you have to always use, as you said, the key fact: angles in a triangle sum to 180. And the fact it does look the same, but the numbers have changed. If you change the drawing ever so slightly, then looking for a bigger number or looking for a smaller number. And there's nothing wrong with, do you know, when we see it in exam papers and question books saying not drawn to scale? I quite like that, because the pupils aren't going to be looking and guessing. They're going to use what they have to use. The fact that some side of triangle 180. So yeah, as you say, you just want that practice, don't you? It's like, okay, I'm not sure about this one. We need 6 questions. Off you go. And again, these can be screen grabbed quite quickly. Although I remember seeing something through your website, and I knew you're showing me stuff when I played with it by myself and clearly not found it. There were sometimes I found things where you could print some of this. Now, is that somewhere else on the website?
Yeah, no, so the main tools are kind of like here. So we've got the model, we've got the mini WB, we've got the recall, which is basically what I would use a following lesson. So if I wasn't using the last lesson, last week, last topic, then I'd actually use the recall, which basically brings up a question at each star. So that then the students then get that full journey that we potentially, I mean, obviously with this one, it's not a great example because I think the equations one was a better one where you can kind of see.
Go on, don't be shy. I mean, I think this is nice. I think you're seeing a range of questions. It's again, key on fluency, key on practice. We're not going into reasoning and problem solving. It's very clear what we're trying to focus on, just the practice of the use of the key facts. And that's fine. It has an absolute place. But you wanted to go on. So this one here, for example, then.
Yeah, or this one. So the idea of this is that we've got always, the first star is calculating the hypotenuse. 2-star is always calculating the shorter side. And then the third star is altering between calculating a hypotenuse or a shorter side. So then when students become complacent with, oh, you square it, add it, square root it, or by the third star, they then have to actively choose which one they're going to use. Then we move into non-right angle shapes, and this requires a bit of problem solving. Then we've got coordinates, and then we've got 3D. So there you've got, hopefully, most of the questions that students could potentially be asked about Pythagoras, but in a full journey. So I've just been doing this with bottom set year 9, and they have been absolutely brilliant. I've got a few of them now doing Pythagoras in 3D. And we're not a high-flying school or anything like that. I mean, my bottom set, if I get a 4 out of them by the time they get into year 11, I will be absolutely chuffed. But they have been so engaged with this and loving how the learning from one step helps them then move on to the next. And it's just kind of like a subtle change of the context has been slightly altered, but it's still Pythagoras. They could, after 1 week of teaching it, they're moving on, and hopefully moving upwards out of the bottom set. But yeah, they've been absolutely brilliant with this.
And again, you've do you know what, my timing today, bearing in mind that I'm my child is 2 weeks old, my sleep is completely off, completely terrible at the moment. I keep interrupting you, I do apologize. I keep thinking I just try to get the right timing. But you mentioned this to your pupils though, select a question to reveal answer. They can be checking themselves all the time on this, which is fabulous. It gives the kids the opportunity to see that journey, for them to practice that journey as well. And as you said, your school, it's a bring a device school, but this is something people can use at home as well.
Exactly. I mean, I haven't actually monitored how well it's being used outside of school, but if I just quickly share it on my phone, you get exactly the same tools that you had on the website, just in a slightly shrunken down version. So if I click on simplifying, you just get one whole question filling the screen, and it works so well. All the answers are there. So even if the question has changed, for instance, if I click on that question there, I can see the answer. Admittedly, I can't see the journey, but then that's the whole point that I want the kid to discover through the lesson.
Of course.
So yeah, I mean, the idea is that although the question changes, it's minimal effort for me when the kid then says, oh, so I've got it wrong, because they've marked it via the website. I can, look as much as I can in a socially distant way at their book to see where they went wrong, or I can get them to describe it, which is I think is a more powerful way. Oh, you took them away, you should have added them.
Indeed.
Numpty. And
without the word numpty, but all good.
But then obviously, so the website's massively grown. I think initially I only ever wanted to do the mini whiteboard tool. And then all of a sudden modeling, recall and secure came about through research. And then cover work came up. And this was quite a big thing, obviously, on Twitter. I think with a lot of schools losing staff through self-isolation, and then requiring something that's, if you've got 20 staff out in a school, and, I work in a fairly big department, there's, I think, 14 or 15 of us. If, half of them suddenly disappear one day through self-isolation, we need something that's quick and manageable to be able to just pick up and grab. So this is where the worksheet tool came in. So if I just find something else.
Prime factor is always fun.
Okay. So let's see how this goes.
It's not the topic you want to
done
use, is it?
Well, I've never done it in Safari, to be honest, so I'm panicking whether I'm going to end up breaking the website. But yeah, it works perfectly in Chrome, and it takes a few seconds for it to produce the worksheet. But a few weeks ago on Twitter, I said, look, here's a 10-second challenge. If you can find a worksheet on prime factors quicker than what my website can actually produce one, you know, maybe I'll go back to the basics and reprogram it. But that's all it takes. And what you then get,
I'm assuming it's downloaded. We can't see it on our screen, but it's downloaded to the bottom of your screen, I assume.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll see if I can just open it up and share this screen.
With and without answers. Okay, brilliant. 10-second challenge. Did anyone get anywhere close? Or
there we go. Not as far as I know. So yeah, there we go. So essentially what it does is it does a screen grab of each of these secure boards. So the secure whiteboard. So there's 6 of my 1-star questions, 6 of my 2-star, and then so on. And it just gets progressively harder and harder and harder as we move through. Initially, it will produce it across 1 A4, maybe 2 A4 pages. And then obviously that can be printed however you like. And the nice thing is that even though every time I click on print a worksheet, it will produce a brand new worksheet for me with new questions, new numbers. You also get the answer sheet as well. So whilst in my school, I mean, we're kind of lucky that our COVID isolations have been fairly small at the moment, and I don't think many staff have been affected. I've been using this as a homework tool. So at the end of a week's teaching, I then print one of these out, and then the kids then can securely practice this away from the classroom independently. And it's been really, really interesting seeing the feedback of kids. They've not been put off too much by how many questions there are, bearing in mind that they're supposed to be doing homework for an hour a week. But yeah, it's really interesting to see at what point they stop doing questions or choose to ignore the 1 and 2-star ones and then focus on the slightly harder ones. And I can't decide whether I should be adamant and saying, look, I want the whole worksheet completed to check that there aren't getting any gaps, or actually they've been selective over, actually, I've just done the ones that have challenged me the most. I don't know. I've been fairly lenient while I've been exploring it.
Well, you mentioned research, but I mean, I know there's research about pupils being able to select their own work and making sure they select their own challenge. And I think it can be a little bit disheartening that you think, oh God, I've got 6 questions, or 36 questions. And there are times when it depends what kind of worksheet you're looking at. If it's one of those worksheets that it is important you first do the first 6 so you can then do the next 6. But I don't think that's necessary with yours. I think you're right. I think you could let them choose. But the problem is if they go straight to the final 6, isn't it? So it's up to each classroom teacher and what's right in their classroom. But you're right with regards to quick cover work and the fact there's that coherent journey through those 36 questions. And the fact the answers are supplied, and that's what annoys me so much about setting cover work. You can't set cover work without answers because it's just not fair. You know, imagine the geography teacher who sat at the front who doesn't want to answer the questions, and he's there going, "Well, I don't know what the answers are," and I've seen it too often. So I think that's fabulous. That's 10 seconds, brilliant.
The other little thing that I put in there in the last couple of weeks, I was sat next to a colleague who was trying to put 2 sheets onto 1 A4 page. She was trying to amend a PDF so that they'd print out correctly side by side. And bearing in mind that took 5 minutes, I suddenly changed the website so that you can actually print out whether it be full A4 sheets or 2 to a page automatically. So if I click on either one of these 2 options, it will actually do the formatting for me.
Let's see if you don't mind. Go on, let's click on it. Let's go with the answers if you don't mind. Yeah. So again, so that's then, is that open at the bottom, has it?
It has, I think.
Brilliant. I'm not a Safari person, I must admit. So, but I assume the way this is saving, and I know Zoom different calls is often different. I can't see it download, but I tried one of these on my computer. I'm a Windows guy, and it's just your typical at the bottom, and there it was. It downloaded for me nice and quickly. So,
It looks like Safari is blocking the second download, but Chrome does work very, very well. It alters the name of the PDF. So yeah, apologies for that.
So you got two things you're going to be working on tonight then: the blocking of the we do you do, and the and whatever happened there. But awesome. Let's go back to the site. I mean, that's as you say for cover, and there is a lot of it. And I know schools who are really suffering right now, but we're trying to look long term as well, and when we're back into what we hope is a normal world. So the modelling, the mini whiteboards for that checking for understanding, the recall as well, and the coherent journey as well through the depth of the questions, all fluency, and that worksheet generator there being able to do that's just such a useful tool. So useful. You mentioned research though, so how you added extra things on because of research. So what kind of research that you've been doing?
Yeah, so a lot of it stems from the Rosenstein YouTube tutorials that we were asked to watch as part of our CPD Hindenburg.
Yeah.
And some of it came about from it was just some of the little things that were mentioned during the tutorials, things like stop the speed camera teaching, develop a habit of good teaching. You know, that has always stuck with me. Nuttall's research which suggested that doing 3 tasks with the same context and more than 80% will then recall the basics by the end. And that's where the kind of secure mini whiteboard came into play. The Willingham research, which was about working memory, you know, the whole idea of then learning long-term, hopefully transferring it into long-term memory, and then coming back at some point, and then you'll either find that you've remembered it or forgotten it. And I think there were so many opportunities I potentially missed over the years with students that I'm now trying to correct through the mini whiteboard website. Yeah, and you know, essentially just sort of thinking about rich learning. You know, we model it, we question to cement a concept before actually moving on. And I think also one of the bad habits that I developed was that I was moving on too quickly. I felt pressured to get through a scheme of work, or we've got an end of term test coming up, and I don't want you to be hindered by my incompetence as a teacher to prepare you for that test. No, it should be about the love of the subject and actually exploring the whole thing, the whole topic. And that's where the mini whiteboard, the maths whiteboard tool has come in, because it's getting me out of those bad habits and hopefully sharing that passion, the love of maths that I have with the students a little bit more, and then seeing that reciprocated as well.
I really liked looking through your website, because I think it kind of helps. I've used the word pedagogy a few times, and a friend of mine, head of maths up north, she hates the word pedagogy, and I kind of smile to myself almost every time I use it now, because using a website means you have to go through the important steps of, I am the most knowledgeable, I'm going to share what I know. I'm now going to discuss with all of you and make sure we have a proper conversation together. Now I'm going to check for understanding, and we're going to do a few of the mini whiteboard activities. Now I'm going to give you a few of these activities just for you to practice it. And all those steps, I know plenty of teachers, I'm sure you've worked with them as well, Matt, that would show it once, get on with it. And you've got all these steps straight away that you've missed out. And again, I think this website really supports pedagogy, making sure you're doing what you call the basics, but they're so important. And it's not basics, they're the actual essentials, as a matter of fact. And then when you've done your questions, I would say then it's time to look at your reasoning questions with things like Andy Lutwich, and I know I've interviewed him, and Open Middle, and I know I've interviewed him, Robert Kravinsky, because that's where the depth comes from. But with regards to the importance of the exposition, your website really supports that, which is fabulous, utterly fabulous.
I think one of the things it does do quite a lot as well is, you know, just going back to my little pen drive, you know, so many times I was sort of like teaching a lesson from PowerPoint, and then because your PowerPoint is slide after slide, it follows the journey that you expected the kids to follow. But then if that doesn't happen in reality, then you're kind of stuck with, oh, I've now got to just shut down my PowerPoint, or you felt compelled to move on to the next slide, even though you're not bringing everyone else with you, which is where I think the maths whiteboard tool comes in, because it allows you that dynamic learning environment to happen there in front of you, and the tools that you want to be able to teach and deliver are there to hand. And if things happen to change in front of you, then at least you're not kind of been you're not stuck potentially with
you got more
PowerPoint.
questions when you got more questions when you need them, haven't you? Now there's other elements. So can I ask you I know I took the screen off for a second. If you want to share your screen again, and on the Maths Whiteboard page, we launched the software. I think we've talked through that, and you've looked through the last lesson, last week, last term, last year. There's one extra element to look at on the pencil box.
Yeah, so this
and this was the bit that you didn't really want to talk about, but I think it's certainly worth sharing.
It was one of my first little projects when I started to learn how to code. So admittedly, 7 years ago, I didn't actually know how to program. I'd done a bit in Excel, and I kind of knew that programming had a lot of potential, but doing it through Excel and potentially macros wasn't the way to do it, because I needed the server-side code, a database. So that's where Pencilbox came in. And again, along the same lines of using mini whiteboards, I wanted a digital format for that. But I wanted to be able to share my screen with the kids. So admittedly, we've got much better systems now. Like if I think of OneNote, Office 365, and some of the tools that are built into that now, I think that's where they now supersede this. But I'm glad that I was part of that journey in order to get there, in a way that it was the vision of sharing teaching resources with students live in the classroom, so that if I was doing an exam question on the board, I could then share my screen with the kids. They would then have a copy on their mobile phones, and then they could annotate it, and then I could screen grab their device and bring it back onto the whiteboard for things like best practice and things like that. So if I just come out of this for a second and I bring up the app.
Cool. Now this can be downloaded. I downloaded it onto an Android phone, and that screen you were just sharing, it can be downloaded onto PC, Apple, and Android as well. So I know I don't want people watching this now thinking this is only now for those schools that do have the bring your own device policy. This has got plenty of functionality, but it also supports that, which I know you'll share with us. But I downloaded it and started playing straight away. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I tried a bit. But you'll certainly show me now, because I felt like an idiot.
Yeah, so just think of this as a typical whiteboard. It's your opportunity to scribble, or as what a lot of people do, that nice sort of funny face. Obviously, I'd started thinking of some of the tools that I wish I had. I used to have an interactive whiteboard in my classroom, and then when that broke, they replaced it with a bog standard whiteboard, and I was like, no, what have you done? Because then that kind of meant that the whiteboard tools that came with that interactive whiteboard I then lost, so I didn't have my digital compass or protractor, and the plastic one had been snapped, so I can't model an awful lot in the classroom. So then I started to think about ways I could actually do it again digitally. So I know you could buy a lot of software that will do this, but to be honest, I was always looking for the cheapest alternative, in which case I just tended to make it myself. So along the side here, you've got all of the tools that are available to you. So if you were doing an angles lesson, you can bring up your protractor, you can rotate it around and actually model live on screen about where students should potentially place their protractor,
How did you do that, those straight lines so quickly? Where did that come from? That was far too quick.
Okay, so we've got our basic tools here.
Yeah.
So if I wanted a slightly thicker pen or highlighter, I can choose those. In the bottom right-hand corner, this is like your quick tools. Okay. So if you wanted to alter between squiggly and straight line, then you've got that as an option. If you wanted to change the thickness of the line, then you could alter the thickness.
That's what that did. I was playing with it. I was like, I don't know what it's doing. Brilliant.
Or if you wanted to undo something that you've done, perhaps if I drew a straight line when in actual fact I wanted it to be an angle, then you can just undo that and then draw it on. And then you've got the bin. In the top left-hand corner, you've then got your color palette, which will then obviously allow you to change the color. And that's kind of as much as what you'd want to know if you were using it as a teaching tool. But if I was using this as a teaching and learning tool, then I'd want to get the kids in on this as well. And this is where I asked them to download the app on their device. And in the bottom left-hand corner, this is where you've got the login screen. And if we select that, I'm the host. So I'll select host and I can generate a code. And there's the code that the students would then type in on their devices so that they then become part of my learning environment. I find it really hard to tell people that I did this like 6-7 years ago as my first project, because it does do an awful lot, but it's something that I haven't come back to, which just shows that actually it works and it doesn't require an awful lot of effort for it to work, because it just runs in the background now, works on our school server actually. So as an example, what I can do, it's a little bit harder when you haven't got 2 devices running at the same time, but if I kind of share what it should do if there were more than one person actually in this learning environment. So what you've got here is now a whole load of other tools. You've got an AFL tool, which basically brings up the opportunity for you to assess kids there and then using their devices is almost like a digital response tool. So I found this really, really interesting because I started looking at, I went to our DT department and I said, look, I want to put a buzzer or something on every single desk. Can you make it happen? And then health and safety kicked off and it never ended up happening. So then when mobile devices became more of a thing in the learning environment, I thought, right, well, let's just turn it into actually a good teaching and learning tool. So if I click on true or false, you can see here it's awaiting the results. And basically, if I was logged in as a kid and I type in true, I'll actually see a live bar chart, so the results are ever changing.
Matt, we're not talking about the obvious use here is when pupils are, if they're having to teach at home at the moment and pupils are having to learn at home, because they can all do this from their computers. We're talking about the classroom, but this is getting everybody's votes and it shows the scores then. They click on A, B, C, D.
Yeah, so you get a live bar chart or a pie chart, I think, depending on which activity you've chosen. So yeah, it's
brilliant. Because I mean, there's things like clickers and active vote systems in the classroom, which I love the idea of it. It's just the extra work that comes with it. But the fact this is built into something else that's so useful, and you've added just an extra kind of feature into something else that's so useful. That's brilliant. So that uploading it as a PDF, is that suggested? I have to ask, sorry, I know I'm getting excited. Is that then you can have something on the screen which you can then edit on top of?
Yes. So again, this came about, I think it was a guy in Singapore. He emailed me and said, look, I hope you don't mind, but I found your app, but I really want to write on top of things. And again, I think you can do that in a lot of software nowadays, but if you've got your students comfortable with using one type of product, it's great that it can then expand to do more, so that you don't have to keep introducing lots of different things. I got to admit, there's quite a few pieces of software that are out there now, and thinking about student well-being, you don't want to then introduce another set of login details for the kids to then access a new product, whereas this, they just need one class code at the start of a lesson and then you're up and running. And the idea with this is that you can actually import PDF documents. So if you upload an exam paper into this, it doesn't get stored, it gets deleted. So hopefully it just gets broken up in the app and it's stored kind of locally as opposed to on a server. And
can I pause recording? Can we load something up? Because I don't want to. Can we put something up? Should I press pause? So for is it really, fact, or is it something that will take too long? Should I press pause, or do you think it's that quick to upload?
We'll see. So if in actual fact, if I just upload I think it might come out quite small.
Right, so probably get rid of everything else that's in the way at the moment. So
there you go.
There it is. Oh, okay, so that got rid of that, and then you'd.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, admittedly, it's not great quality on my screen. But yeah, it's broken up the PDF of the worksheet that I downloaded off the Math Whiteboard tool, so that then you can grab your pen tool and start writing all over it if you need to, which is quite handy. And then because obviously in this case I've got multiple pages to my PDF, if I select page 2, it then shows page 2. And if this happened to be an exam question that I wanted to get students involved in the bottom left hand side, we've got the kind of share button. And if I select that, it basically does a screen grab and sends that out to all the students within the same learning environment as me. So any student who is currently signed in with 9897003 as their class code, they will then see whatever's on my screen. They can then edit it in exactly the same way as what I have done. But you know, 7 years ago, I didn't necessarily think about the way in which I could grab a kid's screen. And to be honest, there's a lot of privacy problems with that anyway. So what I've done is I've got a sharing facility. So as you can see here, I've shared my screen, and I can force collect student screens. So if they are currently logged into my app, I can basically copy whatever's on their app screen and bring it back to me, which will then mean that I can either forward it back onto students, so that if I saw like a perfect example of how a question was to be answered, I could actually send that answer to every single kid, or I could actually bring it up for the whole class to see, which is wonderful, because then it means that we can then have a whole class discussion on what you can see from that kid's display. And then the only other,
this is great.
And then the only other tool that came about because I got fed up of kids drawing on the app while I was trying to teach, you know, exactly the same thing about cognitive overload, 2 things going on the same screen. You give kids a tool like this, and then all of a sudden they are instant artists. And I wanted a way of switching it off. So the little eye tool here, basically what that does is it switches all of their apps off. So if they are currently logged in to the pencil box with 9897003, it will just come up with a teacher has now blocked your access. And then to enable it again, I just click on the eye and then it unlocks, and then they can carry on being an artist. But yeah, it was just another way of control within the classroom. And yeah.
Fabulous. Matt, honestly, I was lucky enough to have it. I mean, this is one of the reasons I joined Twitter, I suppose, so I could, when people share stuff and then you see it and think that's fabulous, and then you play with it yourself. But the point of this series was to get to know either the websites or the functions or the questions, and actually talk to people who create it and how they use it. And I'd played with it, but actually just chatting to you gets me to see how much more there is there. And it's fabulous, Matt. Honestly, good on you. And what you have said to me today and in the past is you'll continue looking to improve it as well. I know you want to add more primary questions, for example, and you take suggestions, and if you can deal with it, you do it. And apologies that I threw one at you, but if you're going to be able to do that as well, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you ever so much for the opportunity of sharing it, actually, because yeah, like you say, it's one thing making it, but showing people potentially how it could be used well, then that's a completely other thing. And I'm sure somebody can show me another way of using my tools in their classroom. Just yeah, I'd be more than willing to see that on Twitter, actually.
Well, let's remind people of your email address. So I'm just going to share my screen again. That's coming up, and you're going to have to. I can't believe if I'm going to make you sing or not. So Matt Woodfine @pixelmatttheapp is your Twitter handle, and all over your websites, your contact details. I've seen the email address on there a few times as well. So as a reminder to people to get in touch with you, Matt. I'm afraid it is something that I make everybody do. And I was thinking, you know what, maybe I shouldn't play the music anymore. And go on. Sing the last bit for me, Matt. Come on.
So I'd go for.
No, you were supposed to sing the yeah. That's why I don't do it. Point of notice required. I'm not anti-textbook. I love how much is shared online, and Matt is a prime example of how much good stuff is shared online. I want people to know how to use these resources. Don't just be given stuff, knowing how to use it. And so, taken off the awesome 80s album, of course, no textbook required. What are your favorite online resources and why? And you have given me 3, so let me just get them on screen and feel free to talk me through them. The first one you mentioned is MathBot.
Yeah, I mean, I said this on Twitter actually, didn't I? I said, I've just watched one of your ResourceFULL websites, and all of a sudden I just didn't realize there was a hidden gem on MathBot. And I think it was the GCSE recall and recap questions, where it sort of cycles through every 5 seconds a particular fact. I think that was the one. Yeah, there you go. And it's absolutely brilliant. And then the other day, I noticed that there's a separate tab along the top of the website, which shows, where was it? So I think I've always been using sort of like the starters and drills, but then there's the tools button. And then all of a sudden, just boom. I'm just amazed.
This website's phenomenal.
Work has actually gone into this.
Yeah, and he adds stuff all the time. And oddly enough, he messaged me about. I've asked him for. I'm colorblind, and so I asked for the Cuisinart rods to have the labels on, and I didn't even know Johnny then, and I hadn't started all this. And within a couple of weeks, he'd done it. This was a few years ago, and I'm thinking, what a nice guy. But like yourself, Matt, yeah, good on him for sharing this, and he's put his donate. I'm going to point that out, that you can donate toward the hosting of the website. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I've interviewed him once, and he talked through some of the stuff, and there's always more. Phenomenal website. Dave Taylor, what a lovely guy. Tell me about how you use his resources.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a good starter for me in terms of showing how differentiation could potentially work, how if you just change something very subtly, don't make it too obvious, you can actually send students on a really interesting learning journey without them actually even noticing it. And one thing I like about all of these examples is that whereas I kind of went for stars, where it kind of shows that actually a 6-star question is going to be harder than a 1-star, here there's no reference to that. And you know, kids, as they move through, they might feel like it's getting harder because something has changed, but it's not being signposted in their face. This is a harder question than what you started off with. And I think that's what makes this website so good. Yeah, just
no, I really enjoyed talking to Dave about the questions, and I know how popular they are as well. Your final choice for no technical required, MathPad. I know there's a number of tools on there that you use, but why did you choose this as your final one for no textbook required?
In particular, I love just the whole little teaching resources that we can have. And in particular, we've got things like the constructions tool along the right-hand side there, which kind of emulates a lot of what the pencil box does. But it's still very, very good. And if people weren't necessarily using the pencil box, then this would be another good alternative for in the classroom, especially if you've got an iPad and you're using things like Air Server in order to replicate what's on your screen actually on your interactive whiteboard. It's another really good way of demonstrating, in particular, you know, constructions. Where should I be holding my compass? You know, although a lot of people are using cameras now in order to show how they would do it on a piece of paper or something like that. This is, again, another good alternative. And then in particular, you know, I love my little applets where you can...
Is that here?
Really good example, but maybe...
Tell me where to go.
In the pink section, if you... Oh, you got the plans and elevations one. I was just doing that the other day, actually.
Oh, not a fun topic. So nice to find stuff on it.
Yeah, and in particular, I think with this one, you can actually grab the 3D model and turn it around.
So what am I doing here?
I
can add to it. Oh, so can I turn it around? Can I click on so I can remove cubes and how it changes? Oh, that's fun. Oh, that's good. You think I can turn it around though? What am I doing? Oh, I can. There it is.
There you go.
That's really good.
Wonderful way of basically, you know, you got the kind of like blocks, you could build one yourself, but then if you've got something like this, at least you can then show them why a particular view isn't working. And that's why I love stuff like this. It just supports your teaching in the classroom.
And with a camera as well, it's very difficult. I think this one's very difficult with camera actually, and holding it like this and then changing it like that and moving it around, etc. So, I'm so chuffed you've showed me that. And Matt, it's an hour. Got to stop because I purposely try and make sure these don't go any longer than an hour. And also, I have to go and pick up my son from nursery. So, I'm gonna, Matt, thank you so much for sharing so much, being willing to share so much, being willing to continue to put more time into it, which, as you said, you're going to continue to do, and the fact I'm throwing tasks at you to continue to hopefully improve it as well. But good on you, Matt, and thank you for the time. I've really enjoyed the last hour.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.